Good day, all. Welcome to our presentation, today's session. My name is Josh Straley. I'm going to be a bit of an MC for you today. And we appreciate you joining us for our conversation today on data collection in 2025. We're going to get into some insights. We're going to have some discussion, and we're going to have some a Q&A. So stick around to the end today. We'll get some of your questions answered live. Before we get started with today's presentation, a quick housekeeping note. I want to tackle the questions that I always get right from the beginning. Will today's session be available after? Is it being recorded? And the answer to both of those questions is yes. You should look for the recording to hit your inbox in the next 24 hours or so. Usually my team gets it out pretty quick. So if you were planning on taking notes, you don't need to. You can wait for that recording. You can always share this with your colleagues as well. A quick note about today's platform. We're an On24, a webinar platform today. You are able to resize windows in this platform as much as you need to, so feel free to play around with it. You're not going to mess up anything for me or any of your fellow attendees. That is a personalized window for you. Some other aspects of this window. You will see a Q&A box. You are able to ask questions during today's presentation, and it's the best way to get in contact with me if you have any questions or problems with the platform. Typically, my advice, if you're having audio problems or video problems, is to just close the window and rejoin, so I can give you that troubleshooting tip right now. But if you have any other questions, toss them into the Q&A box. If you have questions for today's panelists, you can also throw those in as well. We'll probably answer those during the Q&A section of the webinar. So I may not get to them right away, but please get those in whenever you feel like, whenever that question bubbles up, feel free to submit it. We will get those answers for you. Last but not least, we do have a stacked resource center for today's webinar, and I want to call out a couple of resources in there. One is a link to the report that we'll be reviewing today. The data from that report is what we're going to be discussing in this webinar. Feel free to download that and save it for later. You'll also see some links from our friends at DoubleTrack. DoubleTrack has joined us in co-sponsoring this report. We're going to meet Adam in just a moment, but his team shared some links today, some learnings on how to improve efficiency with your CRM, and also if you need to get in contact for some partnership with DoubleTrack, you can of course reach out there as well. And last but not least, we also have another webinar coming up later this month on better collection of payments as a part of your forms. If you are interested in collecting donations, collecting fees as a seamless part of a data collection process, I encourage you to register for that webinar. It'll be led by Form Assembly's knowledge team, and they'll show you how you can build really seamless payment and payment processing and collection flows. Always great stuff. If you've been to any of our other webinars, Joelle does a great job of not only answering your questions, but showing you some best practices in the industry. So feel free to register there. That resource center will be available all along today's call, so don't worry, it's not going anywhere. So speaking of today's session, I'd love to take a moment to introduce our panelists today. I'm joined by Adam Johnson, co-founder and head of project services at DoubleTrack. Adam, good day.
Hey, good afternoon.
Hey, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and DoubleTrack?
Yeah, sounds great. My name's Adam Johnson, one of the founders here at DoubleTrack. I've been in the Salesforce consulting space for about 14 years now, with DoubleTrack here for the last 7 or so. We are a Salesforce consulting partner and also a partner of Form Assembly.
Fantastic. Yes. And thank you so much, not only for joining us today, but also for your contributions to the report. We really appreciate having insights from partners like yourself. We're also joined by David Scavetta, our Director of Security and Compliance here at Form Assembly, to bring us some security and compliance insights. David, how's it going? Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, it's going pretty good. Thanks, Josh. So a little bit about me. I've been working in the security and compliance space since about 2005. First focusing on the financial sector, and since about 2015, generally more in the technology sector. I've been with Form Assembly for roughly 3 years now. I'm looking forward to talking a little more about this.
Thank you for joining us, David. I've really appreciated working with you. As a director of security and compliance, you make some of these, admittedly tough to understand concepts in security and compliance data, a little bit more understandable to a marketing resource like myself. Speaking of, I'll introduce myself. I'm Josh Straley. I'm the Senior Product Marketing Manager here at FormAssembly. I am a familiar face if you join any of our webinars, as I typically I serve as a moderator here, and that's exactly what I'm going to do for us today. So I'm going to kick our panelists off screen for a second and just talk about why we decided to host today's session and why we asked our panel to join us today. Over the last 6 months or so, FormAssembly has been looking into how data collection is changing in 2025. We did a survey recently. We conducted it and sponsored it with Regina Corso Consulting. They're a company that we partner with to do surveys, and we reached out to data professionals. So we reached out to data CRM roles, compliance roles, IT roles, all at the director level or above, and we asked them, the challenges and solutions that they were seeing around data collection in their organizations. And my understanding is that if you are on this call, you are obviously interested in this topic. So we did produce a report of all of that data from that survey that we conducted. That's available in the Resource Center. Feel free to download it. But today we wanted to discuss it a little bit further. So we brought both of our co-sponsors on, David and Adam, to answer your questions live, but also to dig into the report a bit more than you can do in a printed resource. So that's why we're hosting today's webinar. And that's why I encourage you not just to download the report and run away and think that you saved some time. We're going to get you a couple more insights today than you get from that report. The first question I want to ask, because we surveyed these data professionals recently, I also want to hear from the audience today. So I have a quick poll. When it comes to your organization, and I see universities, I see services, I see some nonprofits on the call. For all of you, we want to understand what challenges that you are encountering with your data collection processes. And as we dig through the data today, you'll get a sense of how you stack up to the report. So you can click the response that best fits your situation, your data collection challenge on your screen now, and give me a poll answer, and we'll look at what the spread is in today's attendees. So go ahead and give a click. I see some of you are already clicking. I'll keep this on screen for about 20 more seconds. If I had to bet, and just judging, not to spoil the report at all, but I'm betting that some of you, and perhaps most of you, are encountering manual processes still in 2025. And I'll tell you why I think that in a second. I'll give you about 10 more seconds to answer this poll. Thank you all for clicking your answer, and I will let you know if you beat my suspicion. Okay, we got about more than half of you. Let's go ahead and see. Oh, okay, a little bit closer than I expected. About 50% of you are reporting manual and time-consuming corrections resulting from bad data. That's great. That's, well, not great for your organization, but we are seeing some solutions to that. And outdated systems and lack of integrations. Unfortunately, that is also very widely reported by our survey audience. We're going to get into that data a little bit later, but thank you very much for offering us an insight into what your organizations are struggling with. So, when we surveyed our organizations, as you'll see in this report, 99% of them saw automation as the answer to the problems that they were seeing. And so many of them were specifically seeing manual processes resulting in inefficiencies at their organization, like half of you. However, well, pardon me, before I say the however, they were seeing great results from automation as well. A full 70% reported saving at least 1 to 10 hours a week, with 23% saving 11 to 25 hours, and 7% saying they were saving entire days, 26 plus hours, due to automation. And they were doing that by automating processes like correcting and normalizing data, the processing of the data they were collecting, and probably most specifically, automating manual data entry, which is eating up a lot of team time. However, out of these organizations that said that they saw automation as, and it was pretty much everybody, right? 99%. 77% said that they were reporting barriers. And those barriers were things like inefficient systems, broken integrations, the things that, again, about half of you started to report as well. There are real world challenges to collecting data seamlessly. We know that. That's why so many of you are still struggling with it. I want to bring Adam on screen for a second. You know, Adam, in your work at DoubleTrack, obviously you're working with clients that are seeing these same issues. When you look at the integration side of your clients, you know, where does that come into play when we start talking about automation?
Yeah, it's hard to really understand what the system of truth is. Are we going to have to be entering data into multiple places? Is it integrating in real time? Is it being processed? So with a lot of disparate data in multiple systems, it's really hard to know what the system of truth is. And nowadays, with AI being the hot button topic for everything, AI relies on excuse me, consistent and reliable data. And if you don't have that, you really struggle to get strong results. So being able to understand that your data is going to be correct, it's going to be accurate across whatever system you're integrating to or from, and whoever's looking at it is seeing the correct data and not having to, you know, manually enter it and avoid the human error is something that a lot of people are struggling with today.
You touched on a great series of topics there, Adam. You know, because to your point, siloed data is a symptom of bad integration, either whether it's, you know, a system limitation or whether it is, you know, like a policy at the organization that just happens to keep data limited, but also those manual processes, not just being slow, not just being inefficient, but also being a place and a source for errors, definitely has come up in our data as well. Audience, very quickly, I want to do another quick question for you. When you look at automating processes, what is keeping you from automating things more? Is it, you know, is it system limitations, as Adam kind of mentioned? Is it broken integrations, as our last poll indicated? What do you think is keeping you from automating when you try to automate processes? I'll keep this poll on for a little bit shorter because I want to get to the barriers that our surveyed respondents reported, but I'd love to hear from you if you have a moment to take a click. All right, and I'll give you about 3 more seconds. Thank you all. I'm going to go ahead and close this poll. And this isn't a surprise either to me. Team bandwidth and lack of expertise, very close. You know, it can be tough if your team is busy with other projects. It is tough for them to get their hands out of those projects to say, hey, we need to save time. Let's just make this process a little bit more efficient. And then another struggle, of course, is if that team doesn't know how to automate, it can be very difficult, or what tools to use. You know, you might be stuck with some processes without the help that you need and without the expertise. I do notice a couple of you answered other, and I'd love to dig into that. If you've got a reason that you haven't been able to automate that you'd love to share with me, toss that into the Q&A. But speaking of our surveyed respondents, here's what they reported as what was really holding them back. Redundant tools. They were seeing heavy overlap in the tools that they reported heavy overlap in the tools that their organization was using. They reported system limitations. They reported a lack of in-house expertise, as about 30% of you did, and they reported bandwidth and budget constraints. A little bit more detail on some of these numbers, about an additional survey that we conducted in 2023 had CIOs reporting that their organization had 4.5 on average data collection tools at their organization. They had, you know, several different forms and, you know, like list upload tools that they were really struggling to merge. And again, a full 50% of this survey's audience reported that they had integration issues or broken integrations, as some of you have mentioned as well. Both of these are obviously major struggles, and it's not just you. I want to make sure that you see yourself in this data audience. Other organizations are struggling with this as well. I want to take a moment and turn topics here. And I want to talk about some security gaps and compliance pressures that were reported in our survey data. 91% of survey respondents said that they're concerned their data security. And I don't want to say with good reason, but we all know that, security is a very hot topic whenever you're touching sensitive data. We've all gotten the emails in our inbox that says your information may have been compromised. Take action and change this password. I am based in Southwest Ohio, and just recently, one of the major hospital chains in my area suffered a ransomware attack that knocked them offline for the better part of 2 weeks while their data was held hostage by a bad actor. These stories are all too common, but that's not the type of fear that, like our survey respondents are reporting. They're actually seeing gaps in the security policies at their organization. And of course, we're not going to call anybody out here. This was an anonymous survey, but the numbers are a bit startling. And I'm going to ask David here in a second for some context here, but 35% of respondents said that as a policy at their organization, they lack strong password policies. They did not conduct, at least to their knowledge, regular audits. That's a 37% reported that. 42% said they do not think that they encrypt sensitive data. And a full 50% said they lacked policies around data minimization and policies around how long they can retain data. Now, Form Assembly has a very heavy focus in data stewardship and making sure that our customers, and indeed the market at large, are better handling data. It's a piece of our mission. And so when I see numbers like this, this concerns me. But to see numbers like this, it sounds like most organizations are struggling to implement strong security policies. And David, I want you to give me a gut check here. Like how bad are these numbers when from your perspective? Is this kind of par for the course for most organizations?
The numbers that I'm seeing here don't really surprise me. They do startle me a bit. But I can appreciate that it's very often pretty difficult to tackle these things at a more tactical layer. So, it's easy to put policies in place that say, users will have strong passwords and we will conduct audits. But actually doing them and actually putting those guardrails in place can be a bit more difficult. There are technology constraints, there are bandwidth constraints, complexity constraints, especially for something like data collection, where you may have different teams using different tools to collect different types of information for a variety of different reasons. So when you think about implementing these, especially when you get into something like data minimization, retention, disposal, those sorts of policies, wrapping those around a pretty large variety and disparate volume of systems all performing similar functions can be pretty difficult to implement.
Yeah, and I get that. Just to reference our own security policies here, I think your team makes it very easy for us to maintain, strong authentication measures by using single sign-on and that sort of thing. Not to fluff up our security team, but you guys make it easy. I appreciate that. But yeah, when you have teams that are using 10 to 20 different softwares a day, it can be very difficult to ensure that every single password, every single credential there is strong. I guess a question from me is, out of this list of reported gaps, which one concerns you the most? Is it passwords or is it policies? What's the biggest red flag you see here?
I would say lack of data minimization and retention policies, because even if you have reasonable password policies in place, if you have an enormous attack surface in a form of 30, 40 different systems collecting data, and you have no insight into that, and you're relying just on password controls to manage that, there are a lot of other risks to consider. And I would also say that if you have strong data minimization policies and practices, you are kind of corralling that data. You're centralizing it. You're better able to manage it and simplify those intake and outtake streams so you can better manage how you handle and safeguard that data ultimately. So the other policies you would put in place, password controls, auditing, encrypting, things like that, is much easier and more straightforward to implement and maintain and monitor once you have your arms around a kind of more simplified intake stack and where that data actually sits.
And that's a great point. I mean, if you have retention policies that get rid of sensitive data, like after a certain period of time, which is usually a part of a compliance stance, that also means that you've got less data to be compromised in the event that a bad actor does make it into the system. So that makes sense, and I think that, to your point, that's kind of the safeguard to the rest of these safeguards. Is if you're handling less data, you have less to worry about, less concern there. Well, interesting. Thank you. This was a very interesting part of this report, and I appreciate the context. And I'm sure, some of the organizations on the call are like, yeah, I see myself in that data. No problem. You're in good company there. Let's also let's take a moment to switch gears yet again, and let's switch back to manual workflows that we saw reported in the survey data. So very similar to our number on what people were seeing as an opportunity, automation. Full 98%, or again, almost every surveyed respondent that has manual processes at their organization report that those processes are inefficient. And obviously, anytime you have somebody spending time with their hands in data, manual correction, manual processing, there are enough tools out there to take that on that anytime someone is manually touching that data, it is going to be a less efficient process. So that makes sense. The biggest eye raiser out of this survey report that I saw, especially working at a digital data collection company, was that 59% of the surveyed respondents said that 25% or more of their data collection was paper-based. So a full quarter of the data that they were collecting, the processes they were collecting, had a paper element to them, which is in 2025 is surprising to me, but it should not be surprising, because so many organizations, whether they be in the public sector working with like government policies, or whether in healthcare where the data that they collect and the audiences they serve still require essentially paper processing. Digitization has not come to every industry, and I think that's what this number highlights the most. But this is the biggest eye raiser that I've seen. As you'll see when you download the report, audience, there are costs here where 69% of the surveyed audience reports losing more than 6 hours a week to the manual correction of data, and 6% are losing more than 20 hours, which is wild, but it makes sense. When we asked organizations, what are the challenges with these manual processes? They reported that it's time consuming. They reported, again, integration issues. And as Adam pointed out earlier, they reported human error. They also reported that there's an opportunity cost to these inefficient processes. Their resources were being drained by having to have people manually correct data, having to have IT come in and address broken integrations, perhaps re-upload lists. They were losing time to spend time on other projects. And that's the biggest fear that I have as a part of this survey, is that we recognize that manual processes and the inefficiency they cause are kind of par for the course until we can find time to optimize them. But what we are not realizing is the things that we could be doing with the time that we could be saving. And again, survey respondents that rely on manual processes are losing 15.2 hours every week. That's 2 work days. Think of what your team could be doing with 2 extra days a week, especially as we hit the summer. It's like, wow, we could really be using those 2 days back, right? Adam, I want to talk to you, in your work as with DoubleTrack and the clients that you serve. How have you seen success in redesigning processes that are, have heavy manual components? And, how do you get, because typically manual processes aren't just one person in the mix. There's several organizational processes that have several people in the mix. How do you align stakeholders in those processes to, pull their heads out of the sand and become more efficient?
Yeah, as I alluded to earlier, I mean, part of the struggle is which system is going to be the system of truth or the system of record for each different type of data. And you've got to start there. And then with that, how is that system either receiving or writing data to the other systems that you're looking at? And then if you look at like a CRM, obviously we're a Salesforce partner. We see a lot of times that companies have errors with duplicate data. Duplicate data is always a challenge, and you've got to try to put rules in place, duplicate rules management. I mean, I say this in jest, but we often joke with our clients, if your data gets to a point of it being too messy, you're best off just hiring an intern and having them sit through Excel spreadsheets all summer to try to get your data back to a clean point. So, excuse me, trying to just really identify what's my system of record, putting the right guardrails in place, validating that the right fields are being populated, putting duplicate checks in and data validation rules in front of the user from the start can certainly help with that. I mean, it's not foolproof, nothing is, but it can really, really help prevent the issue before it even starts.
Yeah, that's a great point. And you know, like prevent the intern having to take that summer before it even starts. That's I love that. Sometimes we forget the power of internships and how they can help improve the data quality. David, on this idea of, you know, a single source of truth, is there a security benefit to, you know, kind of like minimizing the systems that data is rolling through, or the processes that it's rolling through?
Oh, absolutely. I've generally always been a proponent of that approach, and for a number of reasons. One, and probably most importantly, from a purely security perspective, less attack surface. You have your data centralized in one single repository. But if we want to focus on maybe more of the utility side of that data, having that data organized in a central place allows you to manage the data that you collect and better understand the process flows, so that if you need to incorporate new types of data, or maybe you want to minimize it and stop collecting or purge data you no longer need, it's much easier in a single source of truth. It's also much easier to apply security controls and audits, policies and procedures around a single system that you're pretty familiar with, how it operates, what teams and departments are using it, what people are using it. And another component of it that you kind of touched on as well is data accuracy. I guess from my perspective, the more streamlined that data collection and management is, the less opportunities there are for, you know, manual correction and needing to fix. Because when I see those kind of scenarios play out, that's individuals going in and accessing that data in the raw. And, you know, people at their best do periodically make mistakes. It can be time consuming to remedy. Even on top of that, you can still have mistakes. And it really kind of depends on the complexity of your operations. So there's a number of reasons to keep everything kind of centralized in a single system that will make your security and compliance teams happy, will make the owners and operators of that data pretty happy, because it gives them a simpler pane of glass to operate from when they do need to use that data for whatever their business objectives are.
Okay, and you know, I think there's a common theme between both of your answers, and it's a bit of control. You know, like if you have, even if you're already starting from a bad place of, you know, like some dirty data, as we kind of call it, you know, misformatted, incomplete, what have you, you need to stop the bleeding. As Adam, you mentioned, you know, yes, put that data into the hands of somebody who can correct it, and whether that's an intern or someone else. But then also you need to put this blockade at the data point of data collection to give you the control over that data, make sure that it's not coming in incomplete, make sure that it is high quality. And David, to your point, if you have just one place where that data is coming in, you have control and a little bit of a better, you know, less of an attack surface, and a little more control, and perhaps a little more governance over the security and compliance component of it. I like that. Everybody likes control. Maybe I'm going to try a good segue here. Speaking of a lack of control, What we also heard from this report is that people did not feel at their organizations that they had an access to data in a way that would help them become more efficient. Essentially, they were reporting silos of data. More than half of the respondents struggled to integrate, as we've mentioned, whether they were broken integrations, whether they just didn't have the time to build the appropriate integration or the appropriate process, but they were struggling to consolidate the information and maintain visibility. They couldn't report on it. They couldn't analyze it. And then David, to the security aspect of this, they struggled to implement some of those policies because data was living everywhere. They couldn't get their arms around it in order to secure it, to even know that they were handling data compliantly or securely. But as with most organizations, really, they were worried about the accuracy and the consistency. If your sales team doesn't have the email address they need to reach out to a customer, if your university doesn't have the phone number of the student, you are going to be struggling to, conduct your normal processes, which is what they were reporting here. Adam, in your kind of sidebar, because you wrote in for this report, you made a point about how organizations are often surprised at the amount of redundancy that they have at their organization. When you're thinking about that, or when you encounter a new client and you start to take a sum of the systems that they're using, how can they how can they tackle having redundant systems? Because clearly they needed them at one point. What's the best way to minimize those systems?
Yeah, there's a couple of different ways to look at that. I mean, one, if you think about just a standard flow for a lot of organizations, you've got a marketing team that's getting data from somewhere, whether it's a lead list or a tool like a ZoomInfo or a Seamless. They're converting leads, they're collecting them from webinars like this, etc. That may or may not be talking to the same system that the sales team is using to follow up with customers, which may or may not be talking to the system that the onboarding team is using to bring a client on base, which may not be talking to the the support system that the team is using. So there's a lot of potential breaks in the process along the way, and integration tools can be great for that, but it can take one misspelled email address, one misnumber on a phone number, and it's breaking those integrations. So visibility across all the different teams can start to break down, and that leads to poor customer experience as they're trying to reach somebody who doesn't have any visibility into the life cycle that they've had as a customer or as a prospect with you. Even simple things such as filling out a web form. If I accidentally fill in the wrong thing, or I close the page on accident, when I come back, do I start where I left off? Do the questions I answer lead me into smarter forms, so I'm not re-entering the same information or entering irrelevant information? So there's just a lot of lack of controls or guardrails, and a lot of disparate systems that can lead to these issues that are frustrating, not only for the internal team but from the customer experience as well.
Oh, yeah. And a great point. The more systems you have, the more likely it is that things aren't talking to each other. And then the more likelihood that you are chasing data around internally, and your audiences that you serve are chasing around weird processes that aren't, they aren't standardized, which it sounds like our surveyed audience struggles with. David, when you think about the concept of silos, this idea that, hey, data is living in this system and this team can't get access to it, but this team owns it and doesn't want it out of there, is there a way that good security policy or good governance can help with that?
Yeah, I would always argue that good governance pretty much starts with policies and getting buy-in from your different stakeholders. So that's definitely the right approach. And starting off understanding, Adam mentioned marketing teams. They may have other, they're going to have their own intake funnels. Sales is going to, but we see it from other teams as well. So generally, where I can find common ground in those sorts of conversations is, at least from a security angle, the less silos you have, the more you can apply governance and controls over those different silos. There may also be cost and licensing incentives to kind of simplify your tech stack onto one or two common platforms. As Adam mentioned, there's redundancy. Ultimately, you could have departments and teams that are not only collecting things in duplication, but also paying for that in duplication. So there's a variety of different wins that come from centralizing where that data is. And also, one thing that does kind of worry me about data silos in general, when we talk about, let's say, a general organization that is just starting on this path and maybe has, a few dozen of those silos, it's hard to understand what data is where, how sensitive it is, what level of governance is applied to it, who's using what. I guess from my perspective, data can be an asset and really valuable in whatever team and department is looking to do with that information, but it can also be a bit of a liability. So when you have these different silos you don't really know about, you could be collecting sensitive records that maybe you don't even need. Maybe it's long past whatever project plan that brought that stuff in the first place. So why have it sitting out there? And the more you're able to silo that into a single source of truth, or at least a single environment that you're comfortable with, you could better manage that and collect the data you need, maybe avoid and purge the data you don't, and expand as you grow.
Yeah, again, I'm looking for a kind of a trend here between your two answers, and what I'm hearing is, consolidation, yields multiple benefits, from standardization of the data you're collecting, from giving you control over, what data is being collected, where it's going, but then also, again, making that data usable, making it less of a liability, and understanding just where that data is going. A lot of benefits is what I'm hearing. And I'm glad to I want to take, we've been digging into a lot of, if I can be so bold, negative data, right? I mean, our survey we wanted to go out there and understand what are the challenges that organizations are struggling with. But I want to talk a little bit, I want to end on a high note. I want to talk about the positives as well. So I want to put this question to both of you, and Adam, maybe I'll have you go first. What are organizations getting right out there? When you're working with clients, maybe a new client, and you're like, you come in and you start to get a sense of their business, what makes you breathe a sigh of relief? What are you seeing organizations do right when it comes to data collection?
Oftentimes, especially if we're looking at a client that is implementing Salesforce for the first time, one of the first things that we ask them is about their data migration and what they plan to bring over from a data standpoint, because data migration can be messy. It can be ugly. It can be a lot of things, but just understanding what timeline of data is actually relevant to the organization, understanding that people are changing jobs, your customers are churning, there's new people entering the market, your product mix might be changing, just understanding that 10 years of data history might not always be relevant. So just getting to the point where the data that's only relevant is coming forward. Now, obviously, there are regulations in some industries and certain data needs to be kept longer, and maybe that's stored in an ERP or another system. But I think it's just really focusing on bringing over the data that you need, cleaning it before you get it into a new system, and then really putting an emphasis on that data hygiene and data quality right from the start. So it's definitely something that's on the top of people's minds. Again, it's something I alluded to a little bit earlier, but with AI being just such a hot topic right now, it's so reliant upon good and quality data that you just have to get it right. If you have a ton of records in your system, and like, again, Salesforce as an example, you want to understand what opportunity trends, what activity history leads to the most close-won deals. Well, if you don't have reps logging activities, if you have data that you just dumped in from another system, if you're not tracking the right lead sources, if things are not getting entered properly, your AI analysis is not going to be correct. So I think it's just really putting a data first strategy around these things early on, and knowing what needs to be in place so that you can get the most value, not only from your organization like we've been talking about, but like as AI enters the fold, data just becomes paramount.
Right. And definitely an asset in that capacity, where it's like, hey, when you're trying to adopt AI, data is not the currency, because now you got to purchase credits apparently, but data is what AI runs on. And I guess to summarize, they're getting ahead of that and recognizing that data quality is important earlier. I love to hear that. We did a conversation with Salesforce Ben a couple months ago, and the title of the session was "Garbage In, Garbage Out," because when you are training AI models on data that is incomplete or incorrect, they cannot, these agents cannot recognize the trends and start taking the actions that you would expect because they're operating off of faulty data. David, we did hear some numbers in this report that says that a lot of organizations are struggling to get security right. Some of their policies are lacking. What are you seeing organizations do better in 2025 than you've seen earlier in your careers? Where are people improving their, security and compliance stances?
So actually pretty similar to what Adam was mentioning. I'm seeing more companies be a little more careful and prudent in determining what type of information they're collecting and putting guardrails on how that data is collected to ensure that the intake process going in is generally pretty clean. I would say I'm seeing more of that. I'm also seeing more indicators that teams in the realm of data collection and whatever role they play, being a little more cautious about what data elements that they truly need and asking themselves, what is the business objectives they really need? What is the project plan? And being more receptive to the idea of minimizing data when they no longer need it, purging data that's stale. I would love to say that security and compliance help be a driver of that, but I'll say I think a lot of that is also from a cost management perspective. As you're paying for licensing, you're paying for data storage costs. All of that adds up after a while. So between the voice to minimize costs and the voice to simplify security and have good guardrails in place, there's a variety of reasons for people to be a lot more aware of that. Also, and I'm trying not to be a doom and gloom kind of guy, but on the security and privacy regulation front, what we're seeing worldwide, and as companies operate more worldwide, is that you have more countries and states within countries that are writing their own regulations on the proper way to handle data for residents of that state, country, organization, whatever the case may be. And it applies to countries, it can apply to industries, it can apply to just about any group. But I think that also resonates across industries, across companies, where people are starting to ask themselves, what data do I really need? And from that data, making sure that they at least take a reasonable attempt to collect that cleanly. And I think that also plays a role in what you guys were just talking about with AI. At the end of the day, we're seeing a lot more movement towards that. And that does rely on clean data. Josh, as you said, garbage in, garbage out sometimes as far as data collection goes. So I think it's a way of kind of looking forward and looking into the future that a lot of organizations, even if they aren't on the immediate AI road track, they know they're going to need clean data to operate from as they maybe start building towards that.
Right. Yeah. Foundational, not just for AI, but for all of your business processes. And that's a great point. Well, thank you, David. I want to give a little bit of time for a couple of questions that have come in. I know we're running a little bit long, and I want to thank the audience for bearing with us. So if you do have questions, please do submit them now, and we'll get them answered. The first from Hong Ingo. They ask, who can I talk to about automation? I would like to learn more if I can utilize this application further, maybe talking to a consultant. Hong, I am under the impression you might be talking about form assembly. You can always reach out to our support team, but if you are looking for someone to, as Adam described, help you take a look at your organization and plan better, I do in the Resource Center have a contact link for getting in touch with DoubleTrack. Adam, does that sound like, if someone is at an organization, they're looking to learn more about automation, is that the kind of people that benefit from your services?
Yeah, absolutely. And there was a second part to that question as well about using form assembly for mortgage loan applications. So I think with that type of data, this is a very relevant topic with data security. And I think something I mentioned, like having somebody be able to go through a forms, pause, come back, be able to pick up where it left off, make sure that data is very secure within form assembly because of the sensitive nature of it. But yeah, it's definitely a good use for form assembly, whether you're going into Salesforce or another CRM. So if you're wanting to talk about what to do with that data once you have it, looking at Salesforce, something we'd love to chat with you about. But I do think, from my understanding, form assembly would be a great fit for that type of use case and very relevant to the topics we're discussing today.
Yes, absolutely, and a good point. I missed Hong's other part of their question. Financial data, PII, those kind of things are obviously super sensitive, but that is one of the types of data that our form assembly's users absolutely collect successfully. And to Adam's point, integrate with systems like Salesforce if you're running your mortgage application process through Salesforce. So we'd love to chat if you're using us for it, but obviously our friends at DoubleTrack can help you architect those systems as well. I have a question from Caleb. Are there typical systems that usually contribute to having a lack of a source of truth or a system of truth? Is there almost like symptoms where it's like, ooh, this process or this software is going to cause problems?
I mean, from my perspective, a lot of times it's legacy systems, it's homegrown systems that don't have API access, it's somebody still managing a part of their business on Excel spreadsheets. It's really a lot of different options for systems that don't have a lot of guardrails, a lot of connectors, a lot of integration points. I mean, Salesforce is such a wonderful marketplace with the App Exchange for just partners that can connect natively to Salesforce, which helps alleviate a lot of that. Form assembly, a great example of something that connects very natively to Salesforce. There are a lot of great integration tools. So I don't know if there's a specific example off the top of my head of like, this is a typical system that drives that. But, with a lot of clients, Salesforce is just being used as the CRM layer. And you've got ERPs, you've got data lakes, you've got data in so many different places, and ultimately maybe you're using Power BI or Tableau and you're trying to compile all this data, and again, duplicate records start to cause issues, which one is which. So I think there's a lot of different potential breakpoints. So I think one of the biggest things is, regardless of what your CRM is or your data like having a good technical landscape and getting the question of data solved early on is going to be just as important as the systems that you're choosing. I mean, to you guys, you say garbage in, garbage out. One of the things that we always say is great technology can't fix bad process. And data is...
I like that. Yeah, no, and a great point. I mean, so many software tools are offered as solutions to problems, but it's really how you use it, and the systems that you put in place. David, I want to ask you this question. Is there any kind of type of system that is, notoriously like a bad sign in an organization? Like it's going to be, if you spot a system in there, it's like who authorized procuring this system? Anything that the security teams hate to see?
Not really like one particular system or even type of system that, if I heard it off the cuff would give me the heebie-jeebies, like, oh no, that's something to worry about. But more often than not, it's lack of a system. So Adam mentioned spreadsheets. That's usually the first thing that comes to mind when I think about, different legacy processes and things like that. There's a spreadsheet that maybe gets shared around, or maybe it's a Google sheet or a 365 sheet. Still, when you think about managing accurate data and managing security controls around that, it's pretty hard to apply that to something that's informal as a spreadsheet or a Word document or a text file. So usually some kind of system is a good starting point, but very often it's those older legacy systems, things that are maybe built in-house, that are tough to maintain and transition from.
Okay, yeah, well, there's a theme for you right there. It sounds like, cobbling together processes and systems. It sounds like a manual process to build that. And then it sounds like it's introducing some of those issues that we're seeing in the survey report data. Well, thank you both so much for your insights today and for answering these questions. I really appreciate it. I know we're keeping our audience a little bit longer than we meant to. Before we go today, Adam, we've already had people in the Q&A kind of reach out, wondering, hey, how do I improve? Do you want to talk about DoubleTrack and the services you offer?
Yeah, as I mentioned before, we're a Salesforce partner, have been since 2018. We got our start really in the Revenue Cloud space, but have expanded to include Sales Cloud, Service Cloud, Experience Cloud, really diving into Revenue Cloud Advanced. Data Cloud and Agentforce are a big push in the Salesforce ecospace, so really looking to be at the forefront of that. We do a lot of work in the technology and SaaS space, transportation and logistics, had a handful of clients in healthcare and life sciences, higher ed, et cetera. We do offer a customer success guarantee. As I alluded to a minute ago, just in terms of good systems aren't going to fix bad process. Like, we're not here just to set up Salesforce for you. We really look at ourselves as a business first, a process first consultancy. So we look to partner with your business at solving problems and questioning, is the process that you have scalable? Is it going to work with what we're trying to do with Salesforce? So really understanding what your success criteria look like and where Salesforce can be a tool in that. So we're a 100% US based company. If you'd like to learn more, doubletrack.com, a lot of customer testimonials, success stories, more about us. Love to hear from you.
Right, fantastic. And at Form Assembly, we love to partner with organizations like yours, solution focused, because so often we recognize that Form Assembly, and I'll give us a brief overview here as well if you're unfamiliar with us, but we're a part of a solution for your organization. We see ourselves as solving a lot of the problems that the report uncovered today, centralizing that point of data collection, giving yourself control over the data you're collecting. And to a couple of David's points, also understanding when you don't want to collect data, when you don't need it in your system. Instituting data minimization is something that organizations use Form Assembly forms for. You only need to collect the data that you need. You don't need to send all of it to Salesforce. You can send some of it to Salesforce. You can send others to perhaps homegrown systems if you still have those, or other systems for analysis. We're really a secure and compliant point of data collection, and we allow you to build processes on us, on our platform, that work in almost every industry. So, to Adam's point, they help clients across multiple industries, whether it's really sensitive data like mortgage applications or healthcare information, or if it's simple marketing data, as we talked about earlier on this call. Our customers use us for everything. We make it very simple to consolidate all of your data collection processes onto a single platform. So if you're looking for a tool to add to your organization to address some of the issues that we've uncovered in today's call, I think Form Assembly might have an answer for you. So I've got contact links for both DoubleTrack and for Form Assembly in our resources center. If you want to take a next step, if you want to reach out and get some answers from either team, you can go ahead and take that action from the resource center. Or if you're still here and you loved clicking on polls, if you'd love to raise your hand and have me send one of my coworkers out to talk to you after this call, feel free to click yes here, and we can go ahead and give you a ring or perhaps an email, because our forms do collect as little data as possible. So whatever you give us, we'll be able to follow up with you. But of course, if you don't have time to submit today's poll, you don't need to worry about that. You can also visit us at formassembly.com. Before you leave today, do grab a copy of the report that we overviewed. We only got to the highlights. We didn't get to cover every piece of data in that report, and it had some really eye-opening things. If your organization is struggling with some data collection processes, I think this report might be the start to you figuring out where those issues are and how you can solve them by working with, someone like DoubleTrack or someone like FormAssembly. So feel free. We've also got some further reading from our friends at DoubleTrack there. I want to take a moment to once again thank our audience. Thank you for the time you spent here with us today. And panelists, thank you so much. David, Adam, I really appreciate both your contributions to the report that we wrote and also to today's discussion. It was really nice getting to talk to you.
Yeah, thank you. Same to you.
Yeah, likewise. It was nice to chat, as always.
Great. Thank you again. Reach out to formassembly.com if you'd like to attend more webinars in the future, and we'll see you at the next one.